welcome to the second of the Witch's 8 Paths of Power supplement videos. In this one I'm going to demonstrate the 5 Tibetan Rites. I'm going to show you the standard method of doing them, and then I'm going to suggest ways that you can adapt them for your own physical needs. So in the first of the 5 rites, all we're really doing is spinning in place. We're spinning clockwise, or possibly counterclockwise if you're in the southern hemisphere. And what you do is you extend your arms as far out to the sides as you can. You look at a point in the distance that you focus on, and this prevents you from getting dizzy. So, you start turning, and as you do, you keep your eye on that point as much as possible. And this, again, provides balance. Now, you work up to a total of 21 repetitions, and don't forget that you're supposed to do them in odd numbers. So is that I change which hand is going up and which hand is going down from day to day. I don't know if you can see in the video, but my right hand is facing the sky and my left hand is facing the ground. That's the way the whirling dervishes like to do this when they do their circles, and it's because this connects with the divine. But because we're witches, we like to have a balance, so we like to connect with heaven and earth. That's my thought on it anyway. Now, of course, to adapt this exercise, you would spin in place to the best of your ability. So perhaps you are in a wheelchair and you would spin one wheel so that you could turn in a circle. If you don't have that kind of mobility, you could spin on an office chair, or you could possibly even use a merry-go-round. The idea is to create that sense of being slightly out of balance so that the rest of the exercises become meditative. So in the second rite, what you're basically doing is a sit-up, but it's a little bit more complicated than that. Now, the best way to get into position is to spread your feet just slightly more than your hip width apart, and bend your knees like this, and then you get down on the ground like so, and extend your legs. I like to do that too because it straightens your back out pretty well. So the ideal way to do this movement is to lift your whole body up into a V and extend your arms forward while you're doing so, like so, except that, as you can see, I still find that a little challenging. And then back down. And remember, in the Tibetan rites, you're inhaling as you go up and exhaling as you go down, which is counterintuitive for those of you who've done yoga and other classes. When you run out of breath, it's time to relax. That's why it's done that way. So, many ways to adapt this exercise again. The way that I tend to do it is I just go up as far as I can and get as close to a V as possible, like so. So, what this? But of course, lots of people find that difficult too. So another thing you can do, if that's too challenging, is keep your feet and in the original position and your knees bent, and go up like so. Or you can just do leg lifts if you find that easier to start with. Notice that I'm bracing now on my elbows. Now from a seated position, say again, you're in a wheelchair. In this case, stretch forward. It's not quite the same movement, but it's pretty close. And remember again, when you pick the exercise, do whichever one you find the most challenging, or as many as you can of the one you find the most challenging. Because you're supposed to do the same amount of each exercise. Lost my balance there for a minute. And that's the second rite. So I've tied up my shirt here so that you can see the movement better. This is rite number 3. And the idea here is you're on your knees with your back straight, your hands more or less on your hips, and you're trying to stretch as far back as you can and stretch out your upper back. Now remember that in Tibetans you breathe in when you're making the contraction and breathe out when you're relaxing. In this movement you slide your hands down to just below your butt there. So it looks like this. Ways to adapt this. Some people find it really difficult to be on their knees for that length of time, so you might try sitting down so that you're sitting on your heels. And then again, it's just the same movement. Don't forget to lean your head back. And if you can't do that, then the idea is to lean as far back as you can from a stationary position. So it could look like that. I think I'll finish it up now. Don't worry if you're not this maneuverable or flexible. It just comes with practice, right? And again, working up to 21 repetitions. So this is rite number 4. And this one some people find rather challenging because it involves lifting yourself from this straight back seated position into a bridge. And unfortunately there aren't a lot of good ways to adapt this one that I could think of. One method you could do is that you could lay yourself down on your elbows and thrust upward with your pelvis as much as possible. Inhale as you go up, exhale as you go down. Another method that you would do from a seated position is to lift yourself up and stretch out your pelvis as much as possible. So you could also try that on a bed. Might be a little easier. But if you can do it, your legs and arm and back straight, and then up into the bridge position. So And that's rite number 4. So the 5th rite is the one that most people find the most difficult. Fortunately, there are lots of ways to adapt it. So what we're doing is we're moving from one established yoga position or asana into another one. The first of the positions, the one that you start with, is called Cobra, and it looks like this. Head back, arms straight, chest out. You're bending at your lower back. Your upper thighs are on the floor, at least most of them, and your knees and your toes are pointed and extended behind you. Now, when you move from that, you go upward into what is called downward facing dog, which looks like this. Notice that my heels are on the floor, my legs are straight, my arms are straight, and my head is down. And what you're actually trying to do is aim your crown chakra between your hands or a little farther back, if you can do that. Now, this still doesn't look perfect, and I've been practicing yoga fairly seriously for a few years now. So if you don't get this right away and it doesn't look like that, that's fine. Ways to make this work. One is that most people who are just starting will try to straighten their legs, but they won't put their heels on the ground. That actually makes a big difference. You kind of got to stretch your hamstrings for that. Another method of adapting that is you could bend your knees a bit. If this is quite beyond your ability, which is just fine, here, I'll show you actually a couple of these movements first before I show you the adaptations, but it looks like this. Into that. And it's, remember, breathe in as you go up and breathe out as you go down. And people who do yoga will have done sun salutations, and they will find that totally backwards. But that's the way it's done. Now, other ways to do this. One is that, probably the easiest. This is the dolphin position. Your head is on the ground between your hands, which are sort of making an arrow, and you can do it like this or like that. Palms on the ground or fingers together in sort of a steeple. And either one is fine, whatever you're most comfortable with. Your knees are bent. And it kind of looks like that. Or like that. You can put your forehead on the floor if you can't get your crown chakra on the floor. And then, from there, the easiest position, the one that people do when they find it very challenging, is to move backwards into child pose. Sitting as much as possible on your hips, which I actually can't do very well. My back is too curved for that. But forehead on the floor, arms stretched out in front of you. So how that would look is like this. So another way you can adapt this, if that's okay, but cobra to downward facing dog in full is still a little challenging for you, then you can do this. This is Sphinx position, and it's basically an adaptation of cobra, except that instead of being up on your arms, you're just down on your elbows. And from there, you can move into perhaps dolphin. Or perhaps, again, it's child pose for you. Maybe you've got problems in your lower back. Yes, that crack is my hair. Which goes to show you anybody can do this with a little effort. So, if all that isn't going to work for you, again, maybe you're in a wheelchair, or perhaps you're pregnant. One thing they showed me when I was taking prenatal yoga, which is actually how I got involved in it in the first place, was to do this up against the wall. In order to do these adaptations, you're going to need a flat surface, a wall, a door, whatever's handy. And this, what you do here is basically you're treating the wall like the floor. So, hands on the wall. This is your equivalent of downward facing dog. And that is your equivalent of the cobra. If you're pregnant, you'll need to be a little farther out depending how far along you are. So, and again, remember that you're breathing in when you're curving your back and breathing out when you're extending your lower back and your butt outwards. You can also adapt this for a chair. I'm going to use this office chair to demonstrate. So remember, of course, wheelchair, limited lower back mobility, limited time on your feet. This is a way to handle it. And it's exactly the same thing. This is the curve, and that's the extension. And those are the 5 Tibetan Rites.